I should have stopped asking questions the first time my partner's story changed. I remember the exact moment. We were lying in bed, the lights off, the room quiet in that comfortable way that only exists when you trust someone completely. I asked something small, something meaningless about their early 20s, and the answer didn't match a story I'd heard before. They corrected themselves quickly, laughed it off, kissed my shoulder. I laughed too. I told myself it didn't matter, that people forget details, that the past isn't a deposition. But something inside me shifted, just a millimeter, just enough to let doubt in. Before that, my life felt settled, not perfect, but solid. I was in a relationship I believed in. We had routines, mornings that flowed easily, shared jokes that felt like a private language, plans that stretched forward in a straight, predictable line. I trusted them in the quiet ways that matter more than words. I trusted that what they showed me was real. I trusted that what they told me was complete. I trusted that love didn't require constant verification. The inconsistency stayed with me longer than it should have, not because it was dramatic, but because it was subtle. A date that shifted by a year. A job that existed in one version of the story, but vanished in another. Names that were mentioned once and never again. None of it was enough to confront them. It was just enough to notice. And noticing is dangerous, because once you start, you don't really stop. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I told myself I was overthinking, projecting old insecurities onto a perfectly good relationship. I told myself that digging into someone's past was invasive, unfair, unnecessary. I focused on the present, on how they held my hand in public, on the way they listened when I talked, on the future we were quietly building. For a while that worked, or at least I convinced myself it did. The first real crack came by accident. I wasn't searching for anything. I wasn't snooping. I was using their laptop to look up a recipe while mine was charging. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. An old email account I didn't recognize. A name I definitely didn't recognize. I clicked without thinking. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't explicit. It was just familiar in a way that didn't fit anything I'd been told. Conversations that suggested a closeness, a history, a shared life that predated me and overlapped with stories I thought I knew. I closed the laptop and sat there, staring at nothing. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was fear. Not of what I'd found, but of what it might mean. I didn't confront them right away. I needed time to make it make sense, to give them the benefit of the doubt. When I finally brought it up, I framed it gently, casually, like it didn't matter much. They explained it away smoothly. An old relationship. Complicated. Painful. Something they didn't like talking about. They looked embarrassed, vulnerable. I believed them because I wanted to, because the alternative felt heavier than I was ready to carry. But belief didn't seal the crack. It just covered it. After that, I started listening differently, not just to what they said, but to what they avoided. Topics that ended conversations abruptly. Questions that were redirected with humor. Stories that stayed frustratingly vague. I hated myself for noticing. I hated the part of me that paid attention. At the same time, I couldn't unsee it. Trust, once questioned, doesn't snap back into place. It frays. I didn't turn into a detective, not consciously. I didn't interrogate them or demand access to their life. I just started noticing patterns, names that reappeared in odd places, gaps that aligned too neatly, a timeline that only made sense if you assumed certain things had been deliberately omitted. The past they described wasn't false, it was edited. The second discovery hurt more because I couldn't pretend it was nothing. An old photo surfaced through someone else, tagged and time-stamped, placing them somewhere they claimed they'd never been, with someone they'd said was insignificant. It wasn't just a contradiction, it was a rewrite. When I asked about it, their reaction was slower this time, less polished. They admitted more, but not everything. Enough to quiet me, not enough to satisfy the questions that had already taken root. I felt trapped in my own feelings. I loved them. That hadn't changed. But love started to feel like a liability, something that could be used against my better judgment. I felt guilty for doubting, ashamed for looking, angry for being put in a position where I had to choose between truth and peace. I oscillated between wanting to know everything and wanting to know nothing at all. When the fuller truth came out, it didn't arrive as a dramatic confession. It came in fragments, reluctantly offered, shaped by what I already knew. Past relationships that overlapped, choices that contradicted the values they claimed to hold, versions of themselves they had intentionally buried because they didn't fit the life they wanted now. They told me they were afraid I'd judge them, afraid I'd leave, afraid I wouldn't love them if I knew. I believed that too. Fear made sense, but fear didn't undo the damage. I started replaying our entire relationship in my head. Moments that once felt spontaneous now felt rehearsed. Vulnerabilities that felt shared now felt selective. I wondered how much of what I loved was real and how much was carefully presented. That question is corrosive. It seeps into everything. Even the good moments lose their shine when you don't trust the foundation they're built on. We didn't explode. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, just long silences, conversations that went in circles, a distance that grew without either of us naming it. I realized something crucial then. Love hadn't disappeared, but safety had. And without safety, love becomes exhausting. Staying didn't feel like winning. Leaving didn't feel like closure. I was changed either way. I had seen behind the curtain, and there was no way to forget that view. I had to confront my own role in it, too. The questions I didn't ask, the answers I accepted because they were easier. The red flags I softened into pink because I wanted the story to stay simple. I don't tell this story to paint my partner as a villain. People are complicated. Pasts are messy. I tell it because I learned something uncomfortable about myself, that I valued harmony over clarity, that I mistook trust for the absence of questions, that sometimes love doesn't break all at once. Sometimes it erodes quietly until you're standing in the middle of it, realizing you don't recognize the ground beneath your feet. What I lost wasn't just the relationship as I understood it. It was the ability to believe without hesitation. And that doesn't come back easily.